What's up, everybody? Welcome back to class. This is the Problem Academy. Today, we're just going to kind of go over a couple of new things with the war. Nothing major happened over the weekend, but some new information has come out, some reports, and we're just going to go over those for now. These ceasefires and times of where it's not much kinetic warfare happening, there's a lot of information that finally does get out. There's not the obfuscation. There's not so much, trying to run cover. So, information does start to seep out, and we're gonna go over that today. We have a new report out about the the death toll in Iran. Uh, there's not much new, nothing happening with the peace talks. So much more stalling with from Iran and just the hardline stance of the American negotiators there. Some flare ups going on in Lebanon. And that all kind of leads to more of this shaky peace that we have happening. First, I just want to say, they come out and admit it quietly, but over and over they do. Reed Rubenstein, who is from the U.S. State Department, he's a legal advisor. He had a nice quote the other day. He said, quote, "The United States is engaged in this conflict at the request and in the collective self-defense of its Israeli ally," end quote. And that's from the official State Department, like a statement they put out. So again, they just admit it, they can't really deny it that we're fighting this on behalf of a foreign nation. One that we actually don't even have an official treaty or alliance with. Everybody likes to say they're our greatest ally, but there's nothing binding between us. You know, it's just the same thing over and over where we get into these conflicts with people that we have no business even being in conflict with. We should just be trading. We should just be engaging with everybody diplomatically. But because we have to back this rogue state, we're forced to then attack all these other people. If only we really followed the Constitution, had Congress be the one who declares war and not just have given up all of that power to the president over the last, and basically since World War II, Congress has not declared war. So that's a major thing that we really should get back to is restoring Congress's power to declare war. Let's see. So, like I said, the civilian death toll came out in Iran. Well, the total death toll. But this one's from Iran's Martyrs Foundation, which is like a government agency. They claim 3,468 Iranians were killed, 460 of them being civilians. So nearly half of all the people killed in Iran were innocent civilians. How much of it you believe because it's a government agency. But then there's also, we have an independent, actually US based agency, the HRANA, which is the Human Rights, I forget exactly what it is, but they actually provided some of the death toll that people were claiming for the protesters in Iran when the number just kept ballooning up higher and higher. But they actually claim higher death toll. They said that there's 3,600 in total killed, 1,700 of those being civilians. They are a part of the NED, which is the National Endowment of Democracy. but I don't believe them with anything. They're one of these government NGOs. If anybody kind of remembers at the beginning of Trump's term, that he went after the USAID, it's which kind of like t- puts out money to all of these NGOs that are just a wing of the CIA and all the intel agencies and stuff. Nothing that they can do officially as governments. They subcontract out to these NGOs and they basically do the dirty work. They start all of these color revolutions around the world and all these protests. They're funded by USAID, National Endowment of Democracy. There's a few others. So, they're propagandists. But it's funny that, the government will quote them day and night for the protesters that are killed in Iran by the Iranian regime before the war. But, don't really talk about the civilians that are killed now. We know that 156 of those civilians killed were in the school that we struck with the Tomahawk missiles on like the first day of the war. We struck the school, and then the teachers called the parents, and they were kind of sheltering in a mosque that's attached to the school. And then once all the parents and everybody got there to pick up their kids and everything, another Tomahawk missile hit again. I did hear that it's possible that a third strike actually occurred as well, but I know that two did, at least. It's just, how can you support this when the first day of the war, we strike a school full of children, just going to learn, going to have a regular day. We strike that with a Tomahawk missile twice just to make sure that we got everybody. There's nothing that justifies that. It's demonic. Honestly, there's no other word for it. It's demonic. To order a strike on a school, that you just revel in bloodshed. You revel in death. Tucker, one episode, I forget what he was talking about specifically, but he was actually saying how like these people like love war because there's nothing more powerful to them than taking a life. And this way they get that high, that rush over and over and over again. And then you hear about the school. Can you really argue with his point? I don't know. It just makes me sick, to be honest. And so, kind of moving on, Iran still has control of the Strait of Hormuz, which doesn't seem like we're going to be able to get them out of that militarily. It's going to have to come in negotiations. It's going to have to come with diplomacy, and you just hope that we do. I did read something yesterday that Iran put out new terms of the peace agreement they're willing to accept, which is they're willing to defer nuclear negotiations to a later date. They're just they said they just want a guarantee of peace and lifting of the American blockade on the strait. And they'll lift their blockade of it as well. Hopefully that little olive branch kind of gets accepted and we move on. This is killing us. Gas is skyrocketing. Just means that every price is now going to follow, and the average American person is going to be hurt more and more by this. Yeah, you hear the propaganda. Well, they're buying from America. They're buying from America. We don't have the capacity to provide enough oil for the world. We don't have the capacity to provide enough oil for ourselves. We have the oil like in the ground. to get enough out and then refine it to then export it, we don't, that's infrastructure does not exist. It, you wonder how people could be so stupid and just jump into these things without thinking of the second and third order of magnitude, like consequences of these things. And it's just complete disregard for the average everyday American. And it's both sides. I mean, we've been at war basically my whole life. If you're under 25, 26, we have been at war your whole life. The United States has been at war your entire life if you're under 25 years old. And like even before that, like, yeah, I mean, we weren't technically at war, but talk about in the first episode, we had a blockade around Iraq. We were bombing them every day. We're bombing Somalia. We're in the breakup of Yugoslavia, excuse me, in the Balkan War. We were in all that, but those aren't Cold Wars. So it just gets to a point where does anybody in Washington even care about us, care about me, care about you? It's pretty obvious the answer is no, but hopefully something gives from that. I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact of it, and I think it's going to be time for any support for any conflict outside of like immediate imminent defense of the United States. I think that's going to be a requirement soon. Uh, Speaking of defense of the United States, we have gotten a lot more information about the United States bases in the region that were hit. There was 11 of them, that are hit very badly. We have bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, Jordan, Qatar. There's been Iran now. It's reported that Iran now has over 100 hits on those bases, and that's just ours. And there's significant damage from that. The administration has been trying its best to keep that quiet. They've blacked out all these satellite companies that you can go online and get real-time satellite imagery, and the United States has blocked that out from being able to access it. Actually, Kuwait, a F5, which we gave that technology to the Iranians back when we were friendly with them, an F5 was used and is what bombed the base in Kuwait. And that's the first like fixed wing airplane attack that we've taken in I don't know how many decades, but it's been a long time. And the base in Kuwait is pretty much, they're saying, uninhabitable. It's just gone. Like, we're not going back to it. There's just obliterated, basically. Our Fifth Fleet headquarters that's in Bahrain was hit extremely hard. I don't know if we'll ever go back there. There's pretty much about over $5 billion at least is the estimate of damages to our bases in the region just to repair them. But if we do go, we have 13 confirmed dead. And every day that you hear the number gets higher and higher of, U.S. military injured. A lot of them severely injured. They take shrapnel, take, debris falling on them, stuff like that. It's a few hundred. I think last I saw was about 700 of our military personnel who were seriously wounded in this. I mean, why do we put our servicemen in danger? What has this done for us? because I cannot think of a single positive that could even be reached from this. No, there's not even like a, unless you live in a fantasy world, and you just buy everything that comes out of Trump's mouth wholesale that, oh, we can't have a nuclear Iran. Iran was never going to build a nuclear bomb. The previous Ayatollah had a fatwa against it. And then they like to play both sides of this, where, well, it's just a fatwa, but that didn't mean anything, blah, blah, blah. But then they're just a crazy theocratic regime that's, so fundamentalist and this and that. Well, all right. So is the fatwa meaningless and they're just going to build the bomb in secret? Or are they a fundamentalist theocratic regime that so takes their religion so seriously that they'll willing to die to kill infidels? You can't have it both ways. It's either one or the other. But again, it's not a theocracy. It never was. Yes, you had the Ayatollah at the top, but even even Hillary Clinton, as much as I hate her, my personal views of her, which are not YouTube friendly, she even said it. I think while she was Secretary of State, that they're not a theocracy; they're a military dictatorship run by the IRGC. But that doesn't make them fundamentalist. They were one of the most progressive Muslim nations in the world. Anyway, but getting back to they had a fatwa against nuclear bombs, nuclear weapons. They never worked on even a delivery mechanism for them. They never enriched high enough to build a nuclear bomb. They had not even made the political decision to try to build it yet. Like, there's two administrations, their intel agencies all came to unanimous, both of them, the Bidens and Trump's intel agency, all said that Iran was not building a nuclear bomb. But Trump decided to listen to the Israelis because they never lie. Ever. And if you think they do, you're anti Semitic, and how dare you? So, again, I think that, honestly, I thought in the beginning of this war that I thought actually last summer after we hit their nuclear sites that, well, now screw it. They're going to build the bomb because you're just going to hit us anyway, attack us anyway. Might as well have the bomb as a deterrent. And then I really thought it at the beginning of this war. But now with the Strait of Hormuz being like a deterrent all its own, they can shut down the world anytime they want to. If anything, this war has done nothing but elevate Iran to a global power. Not a global. I won't say global, but a regional power. Anytime they want, they shut down this strait now, and the whole world knows it. They're going to get a lot more respect when they say things now in the UN. Speaking of UN, I was reading earlier. I didn't get into much detail of it, but I just had to laugh that United Nations made Iran their Iranian representative, or however it works, the president of the Non-Proliferation Committee. I just thought that was funny. The UN is a garbage organization, and we should just get out of it altogether. But that's a whole nother can of worms I'm not going to open today. There's nothing much new besides what I said with Iran proposing to just hold off on the nuclear agreement until after a formal peace deal is made. But other than that, it's not much happening. We didn't go to Islamabad last week like we were intended, and Iran didn't send anybody. They said there's no point, and I really don't see much point unless somebody's willing to cede some ground, but neither side will right now. You know, U.S. is demanding that Iran surrenders control of the Strait of Hormuz and to never enrich. Which again, that's just the poison pill. They will not agree to not enrich uranium. They probably will agree to give up control of the strait, but I mean that's kind of like a meaningless symbolic agreement. As soon as if they ever go to war again, they're just going to shut down the strait again. Like, all right, well, you violated the peace deal, so we're just going to violate this way. It, the fact that now the entire world knows that Iran can shut it down is enough for that. Uh, they, in response, the Iranians are demanding recognition of their rights to control the Strait of Hormuz, and they want like I said, a permanent peace signed. They want to guarantee that they won't be attacked, and they're just stalling. They're stalling until the election, and like I said, that's the smart move right now. As soon as the elections happen in November, Trump is going to be bogged down by committees and subpoenas and all of that. Might as well. He's not. He's going to be in a much weaker state. So why wouldn't they wait? Actually, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is his name. He said that Iranians are humiliating us, and he's completely right. Much as I hate admitting that a European leader is right, he is. Well, here's the quote from him. Said, quote, "The Iranians are obviously very skilled at negotiating, or rather, very skillful at not negotiating, letting the Americans travel to Islamabad and then leave without any result. An entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian leadership, especially by these so-called revolutionary guards." End quote. Again, he's not wrong. You have all these people 3 times last week. The vice president and Jared Kushner and Steve Woodcock were ready to board a plane to Islamabad. And then 3 times Iran said, no, we're not going to go. That's, making us look very bad. I do hope that eventually there are peace talks because that's the only way out of this. The problem with this war, especially with the way it started, was that there was no clear victory condition and there's no clear exit strategy. So before the war, we were talking about they can't have ballistic missiles. And then once the war started and we saw those ballistic missiles in action, it was like, all right, well, just stop firing them and we won't talk about them anymore. Then it went from no nuclear weapon to no nuclear enrichment. And you got to open the strait that was open. And there's no way out of this with us looking good. It's going to be probably worse than Vietnam, in optics. We're going to have to, kind of just concede that this was a mistake, and we're going to have to accept that Iran is now a regional power. Which, you know what? To me, is not bad, actually. I don't like the Iranian regime. I don't like their military dictatorship that they force these women to wear hijabs in public. But that's also a good check on, I think, the most aggressive nation in the region. the most imperialistic, the most ambitious is Israel. If you have a very strong counter to Israel, then you know what? It keeps them in check. Because before this, it was like they could do what they want because they'd have us go in if they got into any real trouble. Now, America is going to be a lot less willing to do that if Iran does step up, then to say that they'll back whoever Israel is. So having that balance of power, I think, will also lead to a more stable region. And I'm not happy that America, the United States, is diminished in the world stage to get it, but at least it's a prospect for peaceful relationships in the region. And I hope so. Speaking of our greatest ever ally ever in the history of alliances, their ceasefire in Lebanon is kind of like the ceasefire in Gaza, where it's not real. They're still striking in Lebanon, escalating it more and more. And they've moved even more north. They've targeted a few towns in the what's called the Bekaa, I think is the proper Bekaa, Beqaa is the spelling, or Bekaa for English, which is like the most vital agricultural region of Lebanon. They get most of their food from that region, and it'd be like hitting the Midwest for us. Like, they've destroyed, roads, olive groves, fields, homes. And Hezbollah has responded, of course. They have their own drone force, kind of like Iran, and they've sent drones to hit all these Israeli forces that are there. Israel is still occupying a lot of southern Lebanon, and the Israel is responding by doing what they did to Gaza. You hit the agricultural heartland of a country, you're looking to starve the population into obedience. That's barbaric. We've moved past this as a world. We're supposed to have. We you should not starve people to get a government to do what you want. Like that's what they did in Gaza. Smotrich was his name. I forget what's his position. He's he's in the cabinet of Netanyahu, and he said in the middle of the war with Gaza was not 1 ounce of grain will enter Gaza, and it didn't for 3 months. People starved there, and now they're trying to extend that policy to Lebanon. Collective punishment is how Israel operates. Now, you're born in a certain country, then you're fair game because they don't like your leadership. Watch your kids starve. Too bad. Going more to home, not home, but, like where I, and I'm sure most people who are watching this can relate to, is the Israeli attacks on Christian villages in Lebanon. The town of Debel. It's a Christian village, stronghold. It's very segregated there. You have like Christian villages, Shia villages, Sunni villages, and all the other, kind of groups. But, IDF went in and bulldozed solar panels, roads were torn up, all the, again, groves of food and olives and stuff. It just destroyed all of those, destroyed statues. There's, over the weekend, I think it was, where the picture that blew up all over with an IDF soldier has like a sledgehammer, and there's a giant, like a giant statue of Jesus on the crucifix. It was basically like upside down. They took it down from somewhere, and he's just, well, show it here actually. And you look at that, and there's, I remember watching. It was like a debate style stream, and I watched the whole thing, and I forget most of the people on it. I know Gavin McGinnis was on it, and it was like a 2-on-2 debate type of thing. It was like one on like a Twitch or something like that, where Gavin McGinnis was teamed up with, I forget his real name, but the guy's on Twitter and I think on Instagram or whatever is Awesome Jew. And like the other two guys got Awesome Jew kind of like cornered, where they got to a point where they asked him like, you can you can eliminate one religion from the world with a snap of your fingers. It can either be Islam or Catholicism. And without hesitation, Awesome Jew, who is actually very close, he's like an influencer and he's close with the Israeli administration, Netanyahu and the Likud party, said, oh, yeah, Catholics, without a doubt. Yeah. And then you see things like IDF soldiers bringing a sledgehammer down onto statue of Jesus Christ. You got to feel they have not forgiven the Europeans and the Christians from Rome. It's kind of just keep that in the back of your mind whenever you read about these certain things, because they play nice. They act like, oh no, we protect these things. Then you see videos of Christians being spit on. You hear about the patriarchs of in Jerusalem being barred from entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Palm Sunday. All these types of things, they've put barricades up on the stone where Jesus was supposedly buried on, not buried, put into the cave, where his body was laid to rest on. You put barricades, 'cause, there's pilgrims all over the world that go there and they pray over it, they kiss it, it's a huge relic in Christianity. And then, the barricades just went up and people can't get close to it. Oh, it's because of safety. There's an aggression to them. It's not just for safety. There's deeper reasons for it. Kind of, we'll move on to some actually news that came out today regarding our Gulf allies, and it's a huge one actually. It's UAE, that United Arab Emirates, Dubai, and they're leaving OPEC, which is, they're kind of like OPEC is a cartel. And there's no other way to describe it, of oil producing nations in the Gulf, and they set limits on how much oil you can produce so that the prices stay artificially high. It's basically they manipulate the market so that not one country just starts pumping out crazy amounts of oil to sell to everybody, and then the price drops and all these other countries get hurt. But UAE has said that they're going to leave. They have like an agreement that they can't renew, and this newest one expires May 1st, so just in a few days they're gonna leave. What that means exactly, I'm not sure. I mean, it sounds like good news to me. Any type of market manipulation is not good, so it's a good, but it does kind of show a fracturing of our allies in the region. especially the Gulf like that. Like, Saudi Arabia has always been the hegemon there, and the other countries kind of just went along with what Saudi said, but they've all gotten so rich and everything that they're guess going independent, which we'll see what that leads to. The energy minister is Suhail Mohammed Al Mazraoui, I think. He announced it on the state-run news agency, and he said that the OPEC wasn't aligning with the national energy strategy, and they wanted to pursue their national interests and ramp up their production. This comes at a terrible time for OPEC. I mean, with the strait closed, it would be good for, I mean, the Trump administration, the United States, and everybody else if UAE does go and starts pumping out it, potentially increasing the supply into the world. They are sitting in a good area, I guess you could say. They have a pipeline that runs south uh, of the Strait of Hormuz, right into the Bay of Oman. I'll put up a map here. And then, so it circumvents the blockade. Iran can still strike at it. I mean, they have struck at ships in the Bay of Oman, but it's not as easy as that choke point in the strait that we see. It's so there will be a lot more oil in the market once they leave OPEC. How much they can pump out of that pipeline? I mean, the pipeline is only so big, so we'll see where that goes. So yeah, I mean, we're just kind of playing the waiting game right now to see where we go from here. Any new breakthroughs? I'll be here to talk about it. Thank you, everybody, for coming to class today, and hope you have a good day. Please make sure to like, subscribe, follow my Instagram at Problem Academy. Anything helps me right now. Take care, everybody.